sometimes would recluse to a private place just to get away from the madness of life. He wanted to be just reflective and just doodle a little bit on his clarinet. But this man was a powerful man for society. He had a great impact on society. His name, Benjamin David Goodman. They called him Benny. Benny Goodman. And I'd like to share with you 3 firsts that Benny accomplished in his milestone career of over 50 years. One of his firsts was that he was the premier artist that brought on swing music in the 1930s. But let me reflect a little bit on things that I enjoyed when I was a young kid growing up. I listened to Benny Goodman so much. And I had his records, I had his albums. I just adored him. I loved to play along with him on the record. I'd play a few of the notes and he'd play the rest of them. And it was so much fun growing up playing with artists like Benny Goodman and trying to learn his genre of music. And as I became an adult, I had an opportunity to join the United States Army and play a lot of swing jazz in the Army. And that really gave me a lot of joy also. So this is something I absolutely love with all my heart. What I'd like to do tonight is share these 3 firsts with you. First, that he was the first one to arrive on the scene. And second, he was able to bring a jazz band to Carnegie Hall, the first one to ever do that. And third, the most important, I believe, is that he broke down the racial barrier between blacks and whites in music. And so tonight, let's start with his grand debut in the 1930s. It was 1931, and he had put out his first single on Montone Records in 1931, and it was such a great hit with all the kids. His music was for the kids. It wasn't for the highbrow and the older people. But he was able to be an instant success. He was actually an iconic figure right off the bat. And shortly after that, another record label, Columbia Records, picked him up, and he started recording with them in 1934. And also then after that, probably the best record label out there even today is RCA Records, and he was able to do 10 top hits with RCA Records. And that really got him his name, as he's named, the King of Swing. Okay, so let's go back a little bit and see now that we've covered the three firsts that I wanted to mention. That he was able to debut jazz swing for the very first time in the 1930s. That he was able to be in Carnegie Hall, and also that he was able to break down the racial barriers between blacks and whites in music in general. The second, I'd like to clarify a little bit more on the second point, where when he came to Carnegie Hall, that was something that he wasn't really comfortable with, because it was a risk for him to decide to go to Carnegie Hall with a band, because if it was a big flop, then his career basically was over. And as it ended up, it was an incredible success in 1938 as he took a full jazz band to Carnegie Hall. And in that band he had top players. He was able to bring black and white players together for the very first time to play in Carnegie Hall, and this was a monumental step forward for bringing unity to both races. And then also, I'd like to talk a little bit about a special player, Teddy Wilson, a piano player. He was able to jam with Benny in a jam session in New York City, and they just bonded immediately. And he put together a trio with Gene Krupa, and they were gigging all over town, and this actually was the very first ensemble with blacks and whites playing together in history ever, and it was a trio. Side note, the reason why it was a trio was because unfortunately there were a lot of white players that didn't want to play with Teddy Wilson, and so all he could end up getting was a trio. But they gigged all over the place, and it was such a great success that a lot of other players wanted to come together and collaborate with Benny Goodman. I'd just like to just repeat, first of all, that he was the king of swing, and he was probably the most prolific, iconic figure for over 50 years, starting in the 1950s, or 1930s, excuse me. And he went on to have a career for over 50 years, died in 1986, and that was at the age of 77. But in conclusion, I'd like to just mention that music in general is something that can very, very much uplift you. It can very much uplift you, or it can bring you down, depending on what kind of music it is, obviously. And I really, really enjoy Benny Goodman's music, jazz swing music, because it's just fun music to play. I'd like to just play a little bit of something he used to do.